Welcome to Learn or Be Learned. This is the podcast show where I read books and show how you can apply it to your life. And, like a true anthropologist, I dig up stories on what people are up to and how that can impact you as well. I'm your host, Shiva Danashekar. This is episode 10, and let's talk.
So I'm here with Saswat. We're old-time friends, and he's, doing medical school and whatnot. Do you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Saswat. I'm a third-year medical student at Arkansas College of Osteopathic Medicine down at Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated with a bachelor's in biology and psychology from the University of Tulsa, and then I just went straight into med school.
Okay, cool. So are you doing MD or DO?
I'm in a DO program.
You're doing both?
DO program.
DO, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard they're kind of merging it right in the next few years.
Yeah, so basically how DO was first started was in the 1800s, there were a bunch of doctors that were bone setters and would just do what we think of, eat this carrot and it'll cure your cancer and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the government in the 1900s was no, if you want to be a doctor, you have to actually do real medicine.
Yeah.
Right? So there was all these regulations. So then DO had to become an actual legitimate field. So now you work as a same physician as a hospital. Now, starting in 2020, they combined the match system for residency application. So there used to be a MD specific match and a DO specific match. And you could apply to the other if you wanted to and stuff like that. And so they just made a one kind of accreditation system.
Okay. And is that because they're just kind of similar at the end?
Yeah, your jobs are the same. Your training is still the exact same.
Okay.
So it's basically DO right now. How it is just med school. And then you have to take one class on musculoskeletal and physical therapy on top of that. But other than that, it's pretty much the same, and you work in the same field. You do the same trainings at this point. So
what about doctors who do acupuncture or what is it called when they, or the one where they
chiropractors?
Yeah. What about those?
So those wouldn't be, they're not medical physicians. So DO and MD are people that doctors you see, they're medically trained, prescribe medication and things like that. Those are fields that have mixed reviews in scientific literature on whether or not they work and stuff. And so some people swear by it, but the literature doesn't really show that. So they don't have the same amount of medical training.
Yeah. Okay. So you've taken all of your USMLE exams. You want to share a little bit about the experience and what you did to train and practice for those exams and what they really are, I guess.
Yeah. So as you probably know, you have to take the MCAT to get into med school. And looking back, the MCAT is actually a joke compared to any test you have to take in actual med school. Just because the MCAT part of it is you don't really need to know anything. Everything's in the passage. Things like that. You don't need to have a heavy knowledge base in order to answer the questions.
They say it's a reading test.
Yeah. It's reading comprehension. And you need to know, you have to have some basic understanding and stuff like that, but it's not that deep. Versus in med school, we have, so for DOs, you take the COMLEX, and for MDs, you take USMLE STEP. And if you want to apply to MD residencies before they merged, you would have to take STEP instead of the COMLEX, and COMLEX would be for the DO residencies. But now that they merged, it's the ACT, SAT. And so I ended up taking both because it's so, the merge is so new that people probably still are used to the ACT, the STEP score. Yeah. So they're told they can take COMLEX, but it's just what people are accustomed to, when they're what resident directors and things like that are used to. So I ended up just taking both.
Yeah.
And what it is there's 3 levels. So the first one you take at the end of your second year, the second one you take at the end of your third year, and then the third one you take in your first 2 years of residency.
Okay.
And so the way med schools are broken down is you have clinical and preclinical years. So preclinical is when you do your classes histology, all the systems, pathology, anatomy. You take your science classes, and then step 1 and complex 1 are just the accumulation of every class you took in your first year of med school. Okay. And so the questions are very more knowledge based of you get a case being this patient presents with stomach pain. What do you think they have? What if they eat like cottage cheese, you would have to know like it's E. coli, and then E. coli is a gram negative, things like that. It's just, you have to know a lot of knowledge and kind of memorize and be able to apply that knowledge. And so that's just like the test I took in June. Yeah. It's like an accumulation of all that.
Okay. And these are like all of them are application based?
Yeah, so they're all multiple choice. It's very application based. So it's like, X thing, and then it's what's X system behind that thing. So it'll be like, Wilson's disease, which is like a disease process for liver metabolism. So it's asking you if the liver metabolism system that you learned in biochem. But the question will be, this person comes in with like gold eyes and like golden skin. So like, it's like, not only do you have to know what they have, but what's the pathology that causes that.
Oh, wow. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but what is the structure like for these exams?
So these exams, both COMLEX and STEP, are a little different. COMLEX is 50 question blocks, and STEP is 40 question blocks. But basically you have 7 or 8 1-hour blocks. You have 1 hour to finish 40 questions, and then you get like a 5-minute break. And then you go through 4, and then you get a 20-minute lunch, and then you do the rest.
So another 4?
Yeah, either 3 or 4, depending on which one you take. COMLEX is a little longer than STEP is. Like it's by an hour.
So that's about 7-8 hours.
Yeah. So it's pretty much just as long as the MCAT. And you go to Prometric at the same side and go through the fingerprint scanners and things like that. So.
Yeah, I remember last year we were talking about this, and you were telling me like the way you prep for the exams. Like one way was you watched like TV shows, right? Medical based ones.
Yeah. So I started recently last year. I started rewatching House, which is like really good. I tried getting into the other ones like Grey's Anatomy and like Royal Pains and stuff, and like. The thing about House is they actually hire doctors to write the scripts and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And so what's really interesting is like now I'm like trying to like beat House based on like what they had. I'm like, I would order this test, or I would give them this medication. It's kind of fun because it's stuff we actually do learn in class. And the STEP test is based on the rare presentations. You're not getting tested over the common ones like the flu, and because everyone knows that it's like pretty easy, and it's not really testing your knowledge. So you do get like all the zebras that like House sees, which is like 1 in a million chance, or like stuff like that.
Do you think this knowledge-based exams, and personally, do you think these are necessary, like with technology, like being able to kind of help you out with this kind of stuff anyways?
It's interesting actually, because now by 2022, the Step 1 and COMLEX 1 will be pass-fail. So they announced it this year, actually, that it's going to be pass-fail. So I think you have to have like some kind of minimum base knowledge, especially like just knowing how medications work, how diseases work. Yeah, it's really good. Also, you're kind of the authority in like people's health. So when they ask questions about like their disease, you have to be able to know and answer them. You don't have time to always run back and look it up and things like that.
That's true.
So, but they did recently change it to pass fail, except step 2 now is still scored. Okay. So the focus will be on step 2 rather than step 1. But yeah, so the knowledge is still important. But it's funny that you bring that up, because we go to med school, and one thing you realize when you actually are in the behind the scenes of the medical field is we have access to this database called Up to Date, which costs like a couple $1,000 a year that the hospital hires. Yeah. And is basically just WebMD, but like for doctors. Like it gathers all those like the journals written about some like disease and things into like one place. And you kind of just like look up like, like stomach pain, bloody diarrhea. And it's probably like a GI bleed, common causes. And it'll actually go through like an algorithm of like, order this step first, and if it's negative, then get a colonoscopy. If it's positive, then it's probably like like some kind of bacteria or fungus or parasite. So it's like we've gotten to the point with the internet where you can actually like look up stuff, but like we don't tell the public that. And, like, they don't So we basically go 4 years of med school to have access to this big database.
I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? You need a small foundation at least, but it's like interesting to think, because, technology has only become more prevalent in society and life. So it'd be interesting to think that, there's probably going to be a point when computers kind of start doing the diagnosis, and you're there for more of the practical hands-on tests and, surgeries and procedures like that, right?
Yeah. So I actually have a friend working at it's called Path AI. It's a startup out in Boston that's basically looking at pathology, which is the field of medicine that looks at microscopes, like diagnoses, things like that, and just like coroners and like autopsies. It's a very like specific type of field you can go into, and they're doing a lot of research on AIs being able to read slides, micro slides, and find features and identify things like that. And another growing field is radiology. The AI is now getting more accurate than the actual doctors themselves, which is kind of scary to see. But I think like in the field of medicine, there will always still be the relationship aspect to it in a lot of fields where like someone just wants to know, because it is like an important part of your health, and knowing that someone is caring for you can improve your life and quality of life. So I think that stuff you won't lose. But maybe like some of the more behind the scenes fields will start being taken over.
If technology were to catch up to, medical advancements and surpass this like diagnosis point, what do you think would be like the first occupations to have job insecurity?
I think radiology would be the biggest one because unless it's interventional radiology. I think just diagnostic radiology is basically just looking at pictures all day, sitting in a dark room looking at pictures.
I heard you could do that like from home.
Yeah. So right now with COVID and stuff, a lot of them, and like even like one of the aspects that draws people to that field is like you don't have to interact with patients, deal with people. You can just like stay at home all day and work from your basement and then just go back upstairs. So a lot of people are like more attracted to that field of medicine because it's still like really cool to like look at the pictures and like come up with your diagnosis. Like you find a lung and see the signs of COVID-19 or something like that. So it's a cool field. It's not for me personally, but I think that's one that's at risk for AI for sure.
You said it's not for you because you like human interactions and stuff?
Yeah. I think right now I want to go with pediatrics. I'm in my third year, so we do rotations, which are every 6 weeks you go to a different field. And third year is more, since the first years are your book knowledge, third year is more learning about like what each doctor does and gain like the clinical knowledge of like, hey, this person comes in with like the sniffles. What kind of medicine do we give them? Things like that.
What pushed you for, pediatrics?
It was just the most fun. So far I've done pediatrics, surgery, OBGYN, psych, and then I'm in ophthalmology right now. And just like of the ones I've done so far, that was just the most fun. It was actually like kind of enjoyable. It's like, especially surgery, for example, I was just dreading it every day. We would wake up at 5 a.m. to get to the hospital and not leave till like 7 p.m., which is, you make a lot of money. So it's like you are getting paid for your work, but it's still like a lot of work.
A lot of hours,
And I like eating and sleeping.
and having a life.
Yeah, exactly. It's just separating. So like a lot of surgeons, like that is their life. It's like surgery in the end. And it's like good for you. Like it takes just like a certain type of people, which is like also really cool about third year is just you kind of figure out who you are and like what kind of life you want to live.
That must be so satisfying, like going from high school saying, okay, I want to do medicine, going through 4 years of undergrad, then possibly a gap year or two, and then 3 years of medical school. And you're finally like, I think I know what I want,
Yeah. But then you have like 3 to 7 years of residency, depending on what you do.
What about yours?
So pediatrics would be 3 years. And then if I want to do a fellowship on top of that, which is like more specialization, I can do that.
Okay.
And so that's why it like ranges depending on the field, but the minimum is 3 years. And the most would be like neurosurgery, which is like 7 years.
And how is the pay in residency versus, becoming the doctor?
It quadruples in salary between like residency and doctor. Your residency, you're basically like an intern is what, is how you would explain it, is you're just like the lowest rung of being a doctor. So it's like a weird dynamic because you can still prescribe medication, you can still see all the patients, but you still have to be like overseen by a preceptor or a head. And so you're just an intern really for 3-4 years.
Okay.
Until you can just practice on your own.
So you've obviously done undergraduate and, it's a huge weed out process. Is there anything in medical school that's a lot of weed out processes? Possibly the exam that you took?
It's a lot different because at that point you've made it to med school, right? Everyone wants you to succeed. So All the classes are definitely tailored to trying to get you to the best you can succeed. The weed out comes in because not everyone can be like the neurosurgeon Ben Carson of the world, you know. Yeah. And so the weed out comes in during your step exams. So based on your score, kind of determines how many options you have. So, for example, in some of the more specialized fields, so like or competitive fields like orthopedic surgery, dermatology, the exam scores required for those are a lot higher than something like family medicine.
Okay. So what does the scores range from, and what is the most wanted and desired fields?
I believe the scores range from 0 to 300. Like it's based on percentile. Passing is 196. 50th percentile is 230. So when you get to like 270, you're already in like the 99.9. So like I've never heard of anyone making above a 270.
Okay.
Because that means you miss like one question on the entire 400 question test, which is already crazy to think about to get that high. And so competitive specialties usually want above a 250. And so those would be like dermatology, ENT, things like that.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people wanting to dermatology because salary's high, right?
Yeah, so I honestly hated dermatology. It depends on kind of why you did medicine. Dermatology it's a nice salary, it's a nice gig. You can patent a lot of things, and it's the most 8 to 5 field of medicine. Okay, so you basically work a standard 8 to 5 job. You go in. You see 40, 50 people, mostly acne, some like cirrhosis and things like that, and then you just go home.
And it's one of those medical fields that insurance doesn't usually cover, right?
Yeah, it's a mixed field where it's both insurance and you take both like just pay out of pocket or you take insurance. Like there are medical diseases that are obviously like actinic keratosis and things like that. That would be like if it's like an actual medical problem, like it would definitely be covered by like insurance, but like smaller things like acne that's like not that bad, but a dermatologist can still help you out, or like scars or like tattoo removals, stuff like that.
So you made it this far. You're about to graduate, not this May but next May of 2021, right? No, 2022. Yeah, 2022. And do you have any advice for people that are either towards the end of their undergraduate, either in their gap year or they've started medical school? Like, do you have any advice you would give these people that you didn't know going in?
I guess the advice would be different depending on where you are in your life. So for college, the biggest advice would be it is really long, like we said. So you go 4 years of med school, you're in minus 200K debt, and then you go into like 3-4 years of residency, and it's basically, first 2 years was basically studying every day, and then I would go to sleep. And then for studying for the STEP, I would wake up, and we were in quarantine at the time, but every med school gives you this period of time called dedicated period where there's no classes, no commitments. All you have to do is study for your STEP exam. Okay. Because that's basically the most important thing and kind of dictates what kind of doctor you get to be.
How long is that?
It ranges from 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the school. So that's something that's important to ask during interviews is about dedicated period. Because most people take like 6 weeks. I think I took 6 weeks, 7 weeks. But there's some schools that only give you 3 weeks, and then you're just like screwed.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and so
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so like, you think is it more of like, is this random, or is it more like private schools and higher end schools that do?
I think it's just based on the school curriculum. Okay. So that's definitely something to look in interviews and stuff. But I was going to say is the people in college definitely make sure that's something you want to do. It's a long, expensive process. And there are other good medical fields like PA, nurse practitioner, and things like that are also really important. And you do kind of get the same patient interaction autonomy that you're looking for from being a full-on physician. So just make sure that that is actually something you want to do, because it's going to be a lot of work. We started off my class, we had 156. And we've already lost around 30 or 40 people. Wow. Either failing or dropping out, things like that.
During your third year?
During just over the span of 3 years. Yeah.
So you said, there's other alternatives like, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, PA. What is the difference between that and an actual physician?
So it depends on the state. But the biggest thing is like your practice autonomy. So physician's assistant, things like that, they still see people, but you're not the physician is the most autonomous. As in, like, the physician assistant still reports, and the physician has to be the one to sign off on all the medications and things like that. So you get the most freedom as a physician, but you also have the most responsibility, the most stress, and all the other aspects that go along with getting more responsibilities.
And is this a 4-year gig, 6-year?
And so those fields, they're only 2-year schools, postgraduate. Yeah. Okay. So you finish undergrad, and if you go to PA school, it's only 2 years. Okay. So it's a lot better for people that go into field medicine to help people and things like that, but don't want to go through the grueling aspect of going through medical school and residency, and those aspects that kind of are really demanding. Especially a lot of people that like have families or starting families and things like that. It can be really hard. I wouldn't say it's not impossible, because like I have a lot of friends that are married and have kids, and they do still make it work. It's just a lot harder.
Oh, I bet. I bet. Do you know, like, around what the salary difference would be for people that no longer did the extra 2 years in residency?
Not sure. I think it depends on the median salary and what field you go into. The salary can range so much. Fair. But it'd be like, I think physician's assistant can make like 120, and like, because a family medicine doctor, like lower end, can make like 200K, right? So there's a decent amount of difference, but it also just varies so much based on location you live, what kind of practice you do, private versus hospitalized. And the way we do payouts is weird, because it's not like you aren't salaried depending on what you are. You don't get, some fields, you don't get like this is your take home annual, versus like, because in medicine, it's very, the way in the U.S. model has it is fee for service. You get paid for what you do, so you have to bill it to insurance, get that back, things like that. So if you're a hospitalist, you get a salary, but if you're in your own practice, you have to figure it out yourself. So it's very different based on what kind of medicine you do.
If you have your own clinic, or you work at a clinic as a doctor, let's say, right? Is it based on how many patients you see?
It's a combination. It's based on how many patients you see, what you do with those patients, because like normal checkup is obviously going to pay a lot less than like fixing like a broken hand. Yeah. So it's just like, what you see, what you do. Yeah. How much time you spend.
Okay. I mean, honestly, people don't talk about physician's assistant enough, right? Like, that's such a viable option that, I wish they would tell more people at a younger age. Yeah. While they're going into, pre-med and all that. Why do you think that's not really talked about? Is it the status?
I think it's just the field is so new.
Okay.
Now they're just starting to get more and more autonomy and things like that. So now, like, physician assistants see most of the bread and butter cases on their own. They can do that. They're still trained to be able to cover checkups and rashes and all that. And so I think it's just like, because it's so new and it's getting more prominent. I know our like school brought it up, or our like undergrad brought it up in Tulsa, but I think just not a lot of people know about it yet.
Yeah. You think
you don't have to take the MCAT, you can just take the GRE.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like not too bad, honestly.
Yeah.
But do you think if it starts gaining a lot of popularity in the next several years, do you think they're going to up the game of like how to get in and like start doing more weed out with that too?
Probably. I think every field that has a lot of responsibility and makes difficult decisions has to have like some form of weed out. You can't just let Joe Schmo off the street be like, oh.
Yeah, just like let him in.
Yeah.
There's so many like paths you can take when you do medicine. What is it like to, do something that's completely different? Let's say like become a veterinarian, animals and stuff like that. Is that like do you see people in medical school exactly doing the same thing, or do they go to like the veterinarian school?
Yeah, so they would go to a vet school. So I have a couple of friends at Arkansas doesn't have a vet school. The nearest one is Kansas. So I have a couple of friends there. So you would go to a specific vet school.
And it's not a program. It's just a completely another school.
Yeah, it'd be like a 4-year school, just like med school. Yeah, you go through. I don't really know their exact training or curriculum, but it's basically another like graduate 4-year school. Same with law would be 3 years.
We talked about what you should do and consider when you're an undergraduate or close to getting into medical school. What advice would you give people that are in their gap year currently, or should they do an internship? Should they do research? Is it based on whatever they're lacking? I don't know. What would you suggest?
Yeah, honestly, if I went back, even for undergraduate, I think a lot of my friends took gap years, especially in med school. And so I think I kind of regret not taking gap year actually and going straight in, because a gap year kind of gives you more experiences that you don't really get outside of school. It's a very different experience working than it is when you're in school. And so if school is all you know, you don't have those kind of skills that you obtain when you're actually working. So like third year is a struggle because you're like with the doctor from like 8 to 5 or like with their schedule. So it's like the first time a lot of times if you went straight through that you're outside of a school setting and actually doing work. So it's a very different experience than taking a gap year. And a gap year also just allows you, I guess not travel right now, but, relax a little bit, de-stress, not get burnt out, because burning out is a really common thing.
Did you feel that a little bit going straight in?
I personally don't really get stressed that much.
That's good.
And so, I was fine, but I definitely had friends that were heavily burned out by the second year, especially in dedicated period. Especially with COVID, a lot of my friends I told you about the 6-week like dedicated period. So they were planning on taking it, say, May 6th would be their day. So they were studying like 12 hours a day, 12, 14 hours a day. Get to May, and then boom, their test is just canceled. So they're already at the peak of basically burning out. And then it's like, you go to sign up again, and it's like next available date, September. So now they just have to go through the entire process all over again. Wow. Yeah. So taking gap year kind of just like lets you reset your mind. Biggest thing is like definitely find out where you're lacking or what you kind of want to focus on. And if you aren't lacking at all, just taking gap year is good. And you can also just relax, have fun, and just gain experience, learn a new language, pick up some hobbies. I think it's less important if, like, depending on your application. There's some places where it depends on why you took the gap year in the first place as well. So if it's to study for the MCAT, then that would be the most important thing to do. If it's to boost your skills or do research, things like that.
And to, boost your resume, is that even important once you're in your gap year?
If you're lacking in clinical experience, for sure. I think a lot of med schools want you to know that you at least have an understanding of what the field of medicine is all about. They don't want you to go in completely blinded, and then third year is the first time you're in a hospital. And so, but boosting your resume, I don't think is that important. I know a lot of med schools talk about like holistic applications and like we look at the person and like honestly like it's most important thing. Even if you look at, there's like surveys online of like med school adcoms at admission committees and things like that. It's basically just like GPA MCAT is like 90%, and then your personal statement is like 5%, and then like your interview skills is like the other 5%. So it's like, like it's good to have a resume, and it's like the way people that have a lot of research and stuff probably did well in school. They were able to balance their work life, so they already were good on the other aspects. So it's not it doesn't help you if you don't have the other aspects. So it's not really like padding. But
so what I'm getting out of this is it's not really a component they look at, but something that aids you in your other components. Like if you have experience, with research and stuff, you can talk about it in your interviews.
Exactly.
And stuff like that.
And so it's something that helps for sure, but it's not like something that will make or break whether or not you get in. You probably didn't get in because of like something else. Like there are people with zero research experience. Like I have a friend in med school right now who went to culinary school. And that was like, she just went to culinary school and then decided to go to med school. So she took the MCAT.
Oh, wow.
And got in. Zero experience, but so.
She had to take the like pre-med requirements.
Took the reqreps. She went to just like a community college, took them.
Wow.
And so it's that's honestly the most important thing. And once you get the interview is also really important. So the MCAT GPA and your personal statement kind of get you to the interview part. And the interview kind of determines whether or not you get in.
Okay. You talked about how like if you didn't do a gap year your first time, working in like an actual setting of like a 8 to 5 or whatever was your third year when you did rotations. So what exactly are rotations and how does that all work?
So basically third year is your clinical years, third and fourth year are your clinical years. So the first 2 years are kind of college. Like you're just in a classroom, you go to your lecturer, you have tests 3 times a week. Versus now it's every 6 weeks you're in a different field of medicine. And so you're kind of just seeing what their actual day-to-day looks like. You also do like the part of the day-to-day. So I'll see patients on my own and write up notes and things like that. And then the doctor I'm with will sign off on those notes and patients and things like that. So you're actually following their schedule every day, going with it. So I mentioned surgery. So the doctor I was with would do rounds, which is like checking up on all your hospital patients at 6 a.m. But that means I have to do it at 5 a.m. because I have to do rounds and then tell him what I found before he does. So I would get there at 5 a.m. Asking, like going to see like 20 patients or so. He would get there at 6. We'd go them together, then do surgery. Then I would have to write notes on the patients I saw. And so I would leave at like 6, 7 p.m.
Yeah. How long is each rotation?
So it'd be about 6 weeks. So you spend 6 weeks in a field of medicine, and it also just like the year that like you kind of finally decide what kind of doctor you want to be. Because the idea of a doctor in your gap year or in undergrad is very different than when you're spending their entire shift with them every day for 6 weeks. So you see kind of what that field looks like more like all the time. Like you're in their office, seeing what they do in their office outside when they're not seeing patients. Versus like there's a lot more to medicine than just like being a doctor and like seeing the patient and like treating them that you start to experience.
And then what would you recommend, once you're into medical school, you just now starting to get like the flow, right? What would you recommend? They like, they're first in their school years, and I think it's like an accelerated version of undergrad in your first year and a half?
Kind of. It's not accelerated to a degree.
Okay.
Because you're studying different things. Depending on what school you go to, there's differences in curriculum. But ours was system-based. So we would go through, the nervous system and then learn everything about the nervous system. What a normal body in your first year is usually what the normal body does. And then the second year is what happens when it goes wrong and how do you treat that.
Okay.
And so we go through every system and you study. And so first 2 years, biggest advice I would say is just time management is the big thing. Is just because you kind of just have to study, and it's very different studying than undergrad. Even though undergrad was already different studying than college or high school was, right? And so even then beyond that, because in med school, you're not in class that long. Like it's only like 3 hours a day. You're only in, if you make it college hours, you're only in 9 hours plus labs, which is a very like mellow schedule. But there's so much you have to do outside and reading and things like that and being prepared. There's just a lot more. And like a lot of times your lecture doesn't really go into it as deep as you need to, but your professor will expect you to go deeper on your own.
Okay.
But you also get to set your own schedule. Like I never went to class. Everything was, all the lectures were online. So we would just watch it on 2 times speed.
I think after, this whole pandemic, I think that's what everyone's like preferred.
But even like med school, like that was just like the standard. And the big other resource I would definitely suggest is Boards and Beyond.
Okay.
Which is like, it costs like $200, but it's 100% worth it. It's basically like Khan Academy for med school. And there's this doctor, his name's like Jason Ryan, that basically went through the med school curriculum and made like Khan Academy videos. Just a lot more, because most med school professors kind of suck. A lot of them are like PhD people that like, care about like their specific research and like are really good at what they do, but they are really bad at explaining it to someone that has never known that disease basis at all. And so this doctor basically went through and just like re-lectured everything.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, definitely. I will have to put like all your like resources and links that you like think people should do, like look at and use in the description. I guess lastly, like we've kind of talked about this quite a bit already, but like we said, it's a long process. You're young, you're 15, you're 16, you're like, I'm going to be a doctor. It's so easily said before it's done. What is your advice to people that are thinking, I want to be a doctor, because you know how long this road is. What would you suggest their best way to know if they can handle this stressful environment, this long marathon? Like, what do you think they should start experimenting with and see, is this right for me?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing would be just to stay open-minded and just know, like, every field. Like, there's no reason why tunnel yourself into, I have to be a doctor, and just kind of like blind your eyes to everything else that's out there, because there are so many different occupations, different things. Trying to figure out what's appealing about being a doctor, like, is it the research access? Then maybe like get a PhD. Like, I know people that are just doing that because they love the research side and things like that. Is it helping people? You can do social worker or psychology, a bunch of other fields. So just not kind of narrowing your vision into, I want to be a doctor, and just kind of being open-minded as you go through life. Be really important. And just finally just coming to the end decision, like your junior or senior year of college is kind of when you would come up with. That's when I decided it was like my junior year. And so just staying open-minded until then, until you finally decide, like, this is what I want to do. Because also, like, in 15, like, you haven't had that many experiences. Like, you don't actually, like, some people pretend like they know what they're doing with their life, but, like, they're not. Even in med school, some people would come in med school being like, I want to do surgery, blah, blah. I'll be a surgeon. My family was surgery. They're gung-ho surgery. And then they get into surgery and it's like, oh, this kind of sucks. Like, I hate this. And then just like complete left turn, So like, even in med school, just staying open-minded is so important, because there's so many fields of medicine that you can go into. So
that sounds honestly more stressful if you're closed-minded, because who knows how many opportunities you blew off because you thought this was the one.
Exactly.
You finally did it, and it's like, shit, I missed all those other rotations I wasn't paying attention in because I thought this was the one. But it sounds like some people also just kind of do it for status and for the money, right? So those are like big myths.
Kind of. And like, the thing is, like, yes, there's job security, but like money, there's a lot easier ways to make money. Like, if that's your end goal, med school is or being a doctor in general is a very stressful process that you might as well just like go work on like investment banking and stocks and just like build money that way in capital. Just trade options, learn how to do that. You make a lot more money. We're in like the first like top like 1%, right? Like, but we're in the bottom part of the 1%. Like, doctors are making like 400,000, which is like still in the 1%, but like that's the minimum. But like the upper end is a lot higher than what the highest end doctor would be making, unless you're like Dr. Phil or someone. So the other one was lifestyle, right?
Lifestyle, status.
Status. I mean, status, I guess, is something that probably only a physician gets. There are like other jobs with like good status, like law and things like that. And so even if that is a motivation for people, but it can't be your primary motivation, because otherwise you'll just get burned out. Like, there's no way you're going to go through that much schooling and studying if your only motivation was, I want to get status.
I feel like a lot of people, you ask, like, why are you doing this? And it's, I want to help people, which seems to be like the basic, like, go-to answer for everybody. But I mean, like, what, I feel like there should be an underlying answer to that.
Because there's so many fields that help people.
So what is, I guess, lastly, what is the reason you decided to go through all this?
My big thing was, I had already always loved like the human body and like biology, even like high school, even though Miss Higgins actually like sucked. And AP Bio was like hell, but just like, so I went into college as a bio major. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with it, but like in college, you're just like, I guess this sounds interesting.
This is what everyone else does.
Yeah, exactly. And then you like take a bunch of liberal arts classes. And then I was looking at the fields and I found out I hated research.
Yeah.
Was the worst thing ever. Like, I never want to look at a microscope. That's why I couldn't do radiology or hit pathology or infectious disease. I just hate microscopes.
Yeah.
Can't do any of that. And I liked the science and the human relationship aspect. Okay. And it was like one of the few fields that combined the two.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what drew me into being a physician, or wanting to be a physician, was just like the combination of the human relationship along with the science background that you get.
That sounds like a good medical interview answer. Like,
yeah, but I mean, like, that's, it's true.
No, I mean, yeah, it's honest. You know,
and that's, I think, that's a good interview tip, is just like being true to yourself, being honest. Yeah, don't try to like be someone you're not, because like people can see through that.
Yeah.
A lot of questions will just like be trying to like, and it's like, do you say what you to impress someone, or do you say like who you are
and for yourself?
And honestly, like the better answers are always the ones where you just say what you think.
Yeah. Well, Saswat, I appreciate you being here, man. I appreciate you taking the time to help people.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, thanks.